I think I just talked to a man who vanished in 1953. Hey everyone, something really bizarre and creepy happened to me last week, and I can't stop thinking about it. I've never posted here before, but after this experience, I need to know if anyone else has encountered something similar. Last Friday, I decided to take a solo trip to a small town about 3 hours away from where I live. I wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle and just clear my head. I booked a room in a quaint little inn and planned to explore the town for a couple of days. On Saturday morning, I was having breakfast at a local cafe when I struck up a conversation with an older man named Robert. He was in his late 60s, very friendly, and seemed to know a lot about the town's history. We chatted for a while, and he told me some fascinating stories about the town's past. He mentioned he was a history enthusiast and spent a lot of time researching and documenting old photographs and records. As we were talking, a sudden cold breeze swept through the cafe, even though it was a warm summer day. Robert looked around uneasily, and for a moment, it seemed like he was flickering, like an old TV with bad reception. I thought it was just my imagination. Later that day, I visited the town's historical museum. It was small but packed with interesting artifacts and photos. As I was browsing, I came across a photograph that made my heart stop. It was a black and white picture of the same cafe where I had breakfast, taken in the 1950s. In the photo, sitting at one of the outdoor tables, was a man who looked exactly like Robert. Same facial features, same clothes, same everything. I couldn't believe my eyes. I called over the museum curator and asked about the photo. She said it was taken in 1953 and the man in the picture was a local historian who mysteriously disappeared that same year. His name was Robert Townsend. A chill ran down my spine. It couldn't be the same Robert I met that morning, right? It had to be a coincidence. Maybe a grandson or relative who looked remarkably similar. I decided to go back to the cafe the next morning to see if I could find him again. When I got there, I asked the waitress if she knew Robert. She looked puzzled and said there hadn't been anyone named Robert in the cafe that morning or any morning that week. I described him in detail, but she insisted she hadn't seen anyone like that. I returned to the museum, desperate for answers. The curator showed me some old newspaper articles about Robert Townsend's disappearance. They mentioned that he was last seen at the same cafe where I had breakfast, muttering about seeing the future and needing to go back. Then he vanished without a trace. Feeling completely unsettled, I decided to leave the town immediately. As I was driving out, my car radio started acting up, switching stations randomly. Suddenly, an old broadcast crackled through, describing Robert Townsend's disappearance in real time. It sounded like it was from 1953. Panicking, I sped up, but the voice on the radio continued. He's trapped ... in between. Needs help. I finally switched off the radio, but the static continued, filling the car with an eerie hiss. I haven't been able to shake the feeling that I met a ghost or experienced some kind of time slip. How could the man I spoke to be the same person who disappeared over 70 years ago? And what did the radio broadcast mean? Has anyone else experienced something like this? Can someone be into places, times at once, or is there another explanation? I'm really at a loss here. TL. Dr. Met an older man in a small town who told me fascinating stories about the town's history. Later found a 1950s photo of him in the local museum. Discovered he mysteriously disappeared in 1953. When I returned to find him, no one else had seen him. Experienced bizarre radio broadcast from 1953. What happened? Update. Hey everyone. I posted last week about a bizarre and creepy encounter I had with a man named Robert, who seemed to be connected to a 1950s photograph and a mysterious disappearance. The responses and theories were overwhelming, and I appreciate all the support. I have an update, and things have only gotten stranger. After leaving the town, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The strange radio broadcast haunted me, and I decided to dig deeper. I contacted a paranormal investigator named Sarah, who agreed to help me. She had experience with time slips and ghostly encounters, so I felt she was the right person for the job. We returned to the town together, and the first thing we did was visit the cafe. I showed Sarah the exact spot where I met Robert. She performed a brief ritual to attune herself to any lingering energies and immediately felt a presence. She described it as a displaced soul, trapped between times. Next, we went to the museum. I showed her the photograph, and she asked the curator for any other records related to Robert Townsend. Surprisingly, the curator found an old diary belonging to Robert. The entries were fascinating and disturbing. Robert had written about strange dreams where he saw a man from the future who warned him about his fate. The last entry, dated the day before his disappearance, read, "Tomorrow, I must go to the cafe one last time. I feel the pull stronger than ever." As we were reading, Sarah noticed something odd. The photograph of the cafe had changed. Now, there was another figure in the background, partially obscured but unmistakably me. I felt a cold sweat break out. I had never been in that photograph before. Sarah suggested we visit the spot where Robert was last seen, behind the cafe in a small alleyway. As we walked there, the air grew colder, and a strange mist began to form. Suddenly, Sarah stopped and pointed. There, in the mist, was the shadowy figure of Robert, flickering like a dying light bulb. I called out to him, and for a moment, he became clearer. He looked directly at me and said, "You must help me find the book. It holds the key." Then he vanished, and the mist dissipated. We were both shaken but determined to find the book he mentioned. We searched the museum archives and found a reference to an old journal, but it had been missing for decades. Desperate, we decided to search Robert's old home, now abandoned. The house was falling apart, but we managed to get inside. In the attic, we found a hidden compartment containing an old leather-bound journal. It was filled with detailed accounts of Robert's experiments with time, strange symbols, and a final entry that chilled me to the bone. I met him again. The man from the future. "Tomorrow, I will step through the door and leave this time forever. If you find this, please set me free." Sarah performed a final ritual, reading aloud from the journal. As she finished, a blinding light filled the attic, and we heard Robert's voice one last time. "Thank you." Then, it was over. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive feeling lifted. We left the house, and as we did, I felt a strange sense of peace. The photograph in the museum had returned to its original state, without me in it. The curator confirmed that all records of Robert's disappearance had changed. He was now documented as having moved away to another town, living out his days peacefully. I still don't fully understand what happened, but I believe we helped Robert find his peace. Since then, no more strange occurrences have happened, and I'm finally able to sleep without nightmares. Thank you to everyone who followed my story and offered advice. I hope this final update brings some closure to this bizarre chapter of my life. TL. Dr. Returned to the town with a paranormal investigator, found more evidence of Robert's time slip, and discovered a journal detailing his experiences. Helped his spirit find peace, and all records of his disappearance changed. No more strange occurrences since. Hey everyone, I posted twice before about a bizarre and creepy encounter I had with a man named Robert, who seemed to be connected to a 1950s photograph and a mysterious disappearance. I thought we had reached a conclusion, but something happened recently that forced me to reevaluate everything. This will be my final update because, well, I think I've reached the end of this strange journey. A few days after my last update, I received an unexpected package at my doorstep. There was no return address, just my name written in a neat, almost old-fashioned script. Inside was an old, leather-bound book, the same kind as Robert's journal, but this one was different. The cover had an embossed title, The Keeper's Guide. I immediately called Sarah, the paranormal investigator who had helped me before. She came over, and we cautiously opened the book. It was filled with detailed notes, diagrams, and entries about time slips, parallel universes, and dimensional rifts. One entry stood out: to the one who finds this guide, you are now the keeper. Your task is to maintain the balance and help those trapped in between times find their way home. Do not neglect your duty, for the consequences are dire. We found a section that described Robert Townsend's experiments in more detail. Apparently, he had been trying to create a portal to connect different times and dimensions. He had succeeded, but at the cost of trapping himself in a loop. The guide had specific instructions on how to permanently close such portals and free the trapped souls. Sarah and I knew what we had to do. We returned to Robert's old home, now seemingly abandoned but holding a heavy air of expectancy. In the attic, where we had previously found the journal, We performed the ritual described in the guide. It involved burning specific herbs, drawing symbols with chalk, and reading aloud a complex incantation. As we completed the ritual, the room grew incredibly cold. A swirling vortex appeared in the middle of the attic, and through it, we could see glimpses of different times, people, and places flashing by like a strobe light. Then, Robert appeared again, more solid than before. He looked at us with a mixture of relief and sadness. "Thank you," he said, his voice echoing. "But there's more to be done." He handed me a small, antique pocket watch. "This will guide you to others like me. You must help them." Before I could respond, the vortex closed with a blinding flash of light, and Robert was gone. The attic was silent, and the oppressive feeling had lifted completely. I looked at Sarah, and she nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility now placed upon us. Since that day, I've had no more strange encounters, at least, not like the ones before. The pocket watch has remained silent, its hands frozen in place. Sarah and I have agreed to keep it safe and be ready if it ever activates. I still don't fully understand everything that happened, but I believe we did the right thing by helping Robert and closing the portal. If the watch ever starts ticking again, I'll know it's time to help another trapped soul. Thank you to everyone who followed my story and offered advice and support. This will be my final update, but I'll always be grateful for this community. If anyone else ever experiences something like this, remember, trust your instincts, seek help, and never stop searching for the truth. TL, Doctor, received an old book called The Keeper's Guide with instructions to close time portals and help trapped souls. Performed a final ritual, freed Robert, and was given a pocket watch to guide me to others in need. No more strange occurrences since. Thank you all for your support.